Ayr Square, Galway on a mid-February Sunday evening, and the ToughMac Subaru, driven by Bertie Fisher, rumbles in to win the Statoil Galway International Rally, the opening round of the ToughMac Championship. Incredulously, this is Bertie's first win in the West, and it completes his set of Irish Tarmac Internationals. But it hasn't been an easy weekend, as James Cullen of the Yorkie Escort Cosworth has relentlessly hounded the Fermanagh engineer over the previous 2 days.
Few people could have predicted the conditions that the 100-plus crews would have to contend with as they passed through the same arch on the Saturday morning of the same weekend. There may be a situations vacant sign on the sponsorship of the ToughMac Championship at present, but there was no shortage of quality and quantity in the Galway entry. New cars and driver combinations abound, and everyone was paying special attention to Liam O'Callaghan's spectacular new Toyota.
Liam, it looks beautiful. Does it drive beautifully?
Absolutely. Much better than the old car from what I've seen so far. So I just hope it'll always look as pretty as it does now.
Mickey Farrell, however, was paying special attention to the temperature gauge on his Subaru.
Temperature's high, I believe.
Yeah, eye light's on as well, so I don't know, we might only get round the corner from them.
The Saturday stages were grouped around Loughrea, the market town on the Dublin Road, about 20 miles east of Galway City. The loop of 3 stages would be tackled 3 times during the first day of the event.
It was the familiar combinations that made the early running. Well, that's not strictly true, actually, as the early leader Frank Maher, last year's winner and the current Tarmac champion, in his Ireland Assist Escort Cosworth, had a new co-driver in Bernard Smith. Frank was 2 seconds up on his nearest rival after the first test, and that rival was James Cullen, incidentally, not Bertie Fisher. James, apart from his indoor antics and the Autosport show, had not been in a rally car since June, but as always the talented Donegal driver was right on the pace from the start. He posted second fastest times in the first 3 stages, and by the end of the loop the Tony Kelly Cars Escort was firmly ensconced in second place. But second is never enough for James. And what of Bertie Fisher, the favourite?
We spun at the very first junction on the stage, and we touched the bank with the back bumper of the car, and we pushed the bumper across in front of the exhaust. For about the next 2 miles we had the bumper burning and the fumes coming into the car. So we dropped quite a bit of time on that first stage, but we've had a good run on those last 2. The stage was shortened, you see, because there was a death in a family out there, and they shortened the stage, and this was a particular junction that I had in my head. You needed a handbrake for it, but the tyres weren't warm. We started, it was 50 yards literally from the start of the stage to where we spun, you know. Yeah. So I was a bit exuberant probably, and trying to get into it too quickly. James is certainly going very quickly, there's no doubt about that, and but I always reckon that that's where the race would be, you know, that James would be the man that would be hardest to beat probably, and I think that's probably the way it'll be, you know.
Yes, by Loughrea, Bertie had a 13-second advantage over both Cullen and Maher, but then we had the Toyota Brigade, which was being led by Ian Greer in his old-shape GT4. The Hillsborough driver was 19 seconds ahead of McHale's similar car and 7 seconds in front of Nesbitt's middle-shape example. But Austin McHale was having problems. It looked to be locking front brakes on the Tom Hogan Toyota, but in fact the brakes were only a minor irritation.
We have a problem with these new electrical systems on the car at the moment. It's overfueling badly, and the engine's running extremely rich, and it was misfire with it. So they mapped for the last 2 stages, so they're going to try and do something with it now. I'm disappointed with this new system that's in the car really, because it's just not working right. But let's see if they can do something with it now. Again, you know, we thought it would be a lot better. It's the double response unit that we're using, so we just have to see if we can get it resolved.
In the new shape GT4, Liam was experiencing some growing pains. Although the Cantac driver was delighted with the SO Ultron car, he was finding it rather wide and quite a handful. And his team decided to lower the ride height at the next service. Eamon Boland in the Hertz Escort also had a new co-driver in Damien Morrissey, and the combination was working well. The Wexford driver was in 7th place on equal time with O'Callaghan. Now for the less happy. Pater Hurson in Eamon's old car is finding left-hand drive in a 7-speed gearbox quite a handful. McKinstry's giant-killing performances in the Formula 2 Escort were not to happen on this event. A power steering failure and a minor fire were high on his snag list, but despite these problems, Kenny and his old partner Robbie Philpott were still inside the top 10. And here, I'm afraid, is another tale of woe. Stephen Murphy and Mickey Morrissey have been off the road on the very first stage and lost 2 minutes. Galway has never been a particularly lucky place for the new National Rally champion, and this little setback is rather upsetting Mickey's hopes of having 2 family members in the top 5. You see, Eamon Boland's navigator is Mickey's son. Amazingly, Mickey Farrell is still in the event, but things had gone from high temperatures to low pressures. Things were not to go much further for Gabriel Snow and Paul McLaughlin. Their Sierra's engine was about to expire. And Hugh Doherty continued on his happy sideways way, but Connie Smith is the quickest of the 2-wheel drive cars. And here comes the parade, led by Michael Murray in the central garage's Nissan. Willie John Dolan is booting his way up through the field like an All-Ireland finalist, and Sean Campbell is finding Group N a little harder than the historics. But that was not the only parade at Beach Hill that afternoon. Sean Quinn was being followed by RTE's Michael Lester, who had the former Rose of Tralee on the notes, and Joe Donoghue seemed determined to get a closer look at her. Sean Blake's Escort was in all kinds of shapes, as Billy Gamble discovered. And that damage was nothing compared to that of Sean Keenan's Astra. Amazingly, Sean and Stevie O'Riordan will survive to take Class 7. And talking about suicide jockeys, Frank Burns holds on to the throttle as Ken Horan attempts to drive. Heroic stuff, but gentleman Ted Johnson is not amused. It's a good time to catch up with some more class successes. Emlyn Wynne and Kevin Latham were on their way to a Class 1 win in their Suzuki Swift. And Pat Carney and Owen O'Neill, the Dunlop Junior champions, take Class 2 in their Honda Civic.
There are always intense category battles within the main contest at any international rally, and the showroom or Group N cars can be guaranteed to provide close entertainment. Last year's British and Tarmac champions, Trevor Cathers and Gordon Noble, again showed their class in Galway. They led Group N from the start and came home over 8 minutes ahead of their nearest rivals, and in a fabulous 6th place overall. It was truly one of the drives of the rally. Willie John Dolan, Trevor's teammate, with Welshman Dylan Jones on the notes, made it as Subaru 1-2 in Group N. Tyrone's great football fan seems to get quicker with each outing. He may not have Trevor Cather's pace, but he can certainly hurt the Ford opposition. That opposition was led by Donal Bones and Noel Carey, who opposite locked their Black Lion Escort to third in the category. Sean Campbell and David Gray, despite visiting one of the dry stone walls, finished their first Group N event in 4th place. But nobody was ever going to catch Trevor Cathers, who was quite simply in a class of his own and the worthy recipient of the new £1,000 Subaru bonus.
Back out in the second and third loops of the Saturday stages, things had turned a bit nasty weather-wise. The Bowleybeg, Hillswood and Beach Hill stages were completely saturated, but even the hurricane conditions did not deter the traditionally large crowds in Galway. At least tyre choice was no longer a factor. It was wet, wet and wetter all the way. Fisher now turned up the wick in the wet. After 6 stages, the gap was 21 seconds. But after 9, it was surprisingly back to 16. As in Donegal last June, he had a real fight in his hands. And as in Donegal, the challenge was coming from the Four Lanterns Escort. James Cullen took 3 fastest times to Bertie's 1 on the soaking evening stages. Sunday was going to be extremely interesting. Liam O'Callaghan was also moving up. But in truth, he was in a different race to the first 2, who would book into Galway some 2.5 minutes ahead of the Toyota. Ian Greer continued to have an outstanding event, but he was driving on a wing and a prayer as there was a terrible noise coming from the rear differential. Ian's team would have to make an emergency run to the north overnight for a replacement part. Eamon Boland was also in this third-place battle. Only 43 seconds separated O'Callaghan, Greer and the Wexford driver. But Austin was dropping back with that fuel overfeeding problem. There did not seem to be much point in continuing, and by this time Andrew Nesbitt had also crashed out of the event. The Statoil Escort was moving in the other direction, and by the end of the day, Stephen had splashed his way back up to 7th place. But poor Frank was in misery. He'd slipped from 1st to 10th by the end of the day due to turbo problems. And as Brian Malone's camera shows us, he was about to have some pretty giddy moments. And I'm not kidding. Kenny McKinstry and Robbie Philpott, by this time I'm afraid, were over the hill in their RS 2000. Kenny, this is looking fairly terminal here.
Yeah, we broke a drive shaft on the last stage there. Just to add to all the rest of the problems we've been having this weekend. Really, I suppose out of the 6 or the 7 stages we done, we only got 1 clean run. So I think we're over time now. So that's the end of the Galway for 96.
The Sunday action started in a city centre car park before setting out for 6 more stages in the Athenry area, and just about everything had yet to be decided. Only 16 seconds separated the first 2, and it was a head-to-head right down throughout the top 10. So let's make some interesting comparisons. We've got Fisher in the top of the frame and Cullen in the bottom. We're on stage 10 and the clock is on them. And the Subaru seems to have the slight early advantage. But Cullen is very neat here. Still lagging a little bit, but by the end of the test they both had identical times, 1 minute 2 seconds. Now for the Toyotas, new one on top and old one on the bottom. Greer is very nimble in car number 11, but watch the O'Callaghan car move on the straights, and under braking it really swallows up the other one. But again, the end result is amazingly a draw. Now for the two escort Cosworths, Eamon Boland on top and Stephen Murphy below. A little bit over-exuberant Boland at the moment, neatness almost paying off. Once again, the braking into this hairpin is very important, and Eamon Boland just about goes ahead. But once again, by the end of the stage, another tie at 1 minute 4 seconds. Still Fisher and Cullen are quickest. And now for our final two, Farrell and Maher. Farrell on top and Frank Maher below. And the Legacy losing out a little bit, but that time Frank Maher got very, very sideways and lost time, and the Legacy sneaks back up equal terms. But by the end of the run, it'll be Farrell 1 second ahead. The Sunday stages in Galway have a history of producing surprises. Remember Liam O'Callaghan in 1994? Well, 1996 would not be much different. That's McCartan-McCaig into the wall. We're on stage 14, but amazingly the Dublin driver will continue to take second in his class. Paul Gaffney's amateur camera gets it from another angle.
Dramatic stuff, and it was this Coalwood test that proved to be the pivotal point of the event on the competitor's first run through the Sunday afternoon. Bertie was under pressure, and it was showing. He'd been dangerously close to that wall. Second is not in Cullen's portfolio. The Drifter's car's on a knife edge, but will sadly slip off before the end of the stage.
It's quite muddy. The car started to understeer a little bit and went up a bank, but it came back down off it again. It wasn't a real problem. But I think because of the pace of the rally and you're there to have the attack, instead of letting it come out of the muck and find the tarmac and going again, like I just pulled another gear at it while it was still in the mud and went about another 10 yards up through the muddy bit, and I just had to have a big rock in the middle of that, you know. One of them things, if you're going to try, you have to have a go. That's it.
Stage 11 would also decide the Toyota battle. Liam slithers through, but Ian Greer is late. Stephen Murphy continues to move up the field in the Statoil Escort as the Carlow driver catches the ailing Toyota on the stage. By the time Ian gets to our camera point, we can see the full extent of the damage. It's a heartbreaking end to a great drive. But you didn't have to search for heroes in Galway. There was one final drama before the top 10 finale. Trouble struck Frank Maher on the very last stage, and the Tipperary driver had to leave the road to avoid a rock dislodged by another competitor.
Damien Keenan and Cathal McCartan made it home in 10th in the Calibre Metro, surely their best performance in the International to date.
Martin Ward and Linda Conroy brought honour to Galway and Loughrea by being the top local crew and the class winners in the Bordnamona Escort.
Then it was that man that we didn't expect to start, Mickey Farrell and Anthony Nestor and the notes.
Stephen Murphy and Mickey Morrissey had the recovery drive of the event. Despite this spin, they made it back to 5th after that early disaster on the very first stage when they dropped 2 minutes.
And there was great joy in the Bolden family with a fine 4th place. Indeed, it would have been 3rd but for 1 mere second. And even bigger celebrations in the Morrissey family, with father in 5th place and son Damien in 4th.
There's still a lot of fine-tuning needed on the new Toyota. Liam O'Callaghan and James O'Brien have shown has immense potential.
Then we had the real pace setters. James Cullen and Bertie Fisher finished almost 4 minutes ahead of the rest. And as in Donegal, James and Ellen Morgan gave Fisher a lot to think about. All the more satisfying, therefore, for Bertie and Rory to take their first Galway victory after a real fight.
This completes all the Irish on it, yeah. This is the one that has eluded me for quite a while. The circuit was last year, so it's nice to have this one under the belt after quite a few tries, you know.